Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth Field Notes live event. My name is Casey Latta, and I am the MLRA Soil Survey Office Leader in Lincoln, Nebraska, and the Field Notes Region 5 representative. As a regional representative, I serve on the Field Notes Review Committee. The Review Committee solicits and selects topics for each webinar. We have selected two exciting topics for you today, and we encourage you to ask questions at any time using the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel should open by default. However, if for some reason your Q&A panel is not open, simply click on the question mark icon located on the right side of your screen. For closed captions, turn on the live caption button located in the lower right corner. Today's session is being recorded. Recorded sessions are available in Teams on the Field Notes channel and the National Soil Survey Center's YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoy today's session. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Hoover to tell you a little more about today's webinar. Dave?
Thank you, Casey. So, this is Dave Hoover. I'm the director of the National Soil Survey Center. Thank you all for attending this fourth one of our Field Notes webinars. I think we've had a great series so far, and we're looking forward to even more as we move along. I did want to call people's attention since you're at this one because you're interested in finding out about what's going on around the country. So, for those of you that want to learn more about what's going on around the country, I would also encourage you to go to our Technical Soil Services reports online. So this is a great collection of reports, usually 1 to 2 pages in length is all, about what's going on with non-traditional soil survey activities, so more along that technical soil services line. There's an interactive map on there, so you can click on the icons on the map and get a report for a particular part of the country. Or there's also a chronological report of what all the papers are. So again, this is a short way of just finding out more about what's going on. Well, let's get back to the Field Notes session. So we had the welcome and the introduction. Let's just get right into our first presentation today, which is by Tiffany Allen from Waynesville, North Carolina, who will be talking about Soils 2026 Implementation Plan. Tiffany, it's all yours.
All right, thank you, Dave. Again, Tiffany Allen, MLRA project leader in Waynesville, North Carolina, but also a federal lands liaison. I'm hoping that you can see my presentation. All right, so thank you for allowing me to speak at the Field Notes webinar. I want to talk about not only implementation, but this Soils 2026 initiative that we do know about. It's not a new initiative. It's been going on for a while, but this is really phase 2. It's the next phase of the initiative where we really have taken a deep look at where we are currently in completing our NOTCOM areas or our initial mapping, and then looking ahead as to how we can finish all of our NOTCOM mapping or initial mapping by the end of fiscal year Soils 2026 and moving on into the future. I know there has been some buzz about, Soils 2026 for a long time, but I really want you to take home from this is that what we are not proposing is an entire DSM effort. What we are proposing is a better method of project planning. And so if you could just keep that in mind as I go through the presentation, that would be great. Keep an open mind, and I will be happy to answer questions at the end. So the overall working committee consists of a few folks. Dave Kingsbury is the lead of the committee. Obviously, the reason for that is that he's the initial mapping focus team lead. And then this initially really started with Joe Brennan, myself, and John Andriani as federal lands liaisons. So we work on all the federal agreements and also assist with statement of commitments with our cooperators. And then later on, we roped in Dave White and Nathan Starman. They represent some much needed expertise that we needed on the committee. So this is the overall Soils 2026 Working Committee. So let's start in 2017. Again, this entire Soils 2026 initiative not being a new thing. So in 2017, a group of folks met, and the goal and the outcome of the meeting was to develop a process to complete soils and provisional ecological site inventory for all areas of the United States, including Alaska, by 2026. And so at the time, what was decided was this 3-tier approach. And so what we're going to really talk about is Tier 2, completing SERGO. At that time, there were about 430 million acres of NOTCOM remaining, 130 of those acres occurring in CONUS. And so if we look at 2017, again, about 130 million acres of CONUS, 300 million acres in Alaska. In 2021, if we look at where we have made some headway, we've only actually really completed about 50 million acres. So that leaves a lot for us to do. So reported acres represent about 12% of the total acreage of unmapped lands. And this is all lands. This is not just federal lands, but 90% of the unmapped area is actually on federal lands. And so this is why Joe and I and John really started taking a look at how we're actually going to get this done. Where are we? Where do we need to go? Which is, obviously full completion of all initial acres. And then how do we get there? Then we started looking at projects analysis and realizing that the who, what, when, where, and why in our projects really hadn't been answered. And in our time as federal lands liaisons, we've realized that there were questions, a lot to do with logistics, but there are questions that we haven't been asking our cooperators. We haven't been asking ourselves that could have helped us perhaps make a bit more headway in our NOTCOM completion. So we wrote this white paper and submitted that to headquarters, and that really, when it all came together, was excellent timing, because one of the things that was being discussed on a national level was, instead of, how do we get to Soils 2026 completion, but in also thinking about our project plans, there's always been this discussion of acres, or how we report acres, or how we report projects, and we've kind of gone back and forth over the last few years, and especially in my career, it's, we sometimes would say, well, it's the project that matters, but then you still have to report acres. So what I really want to focus our attention on is that in the future, what we're being asked is to look at the projects. What we know we have to finish Soils 2026, but we can't just always focus on acres, right? I mean, the acres, yes, that's a reportable mechanism, but how do we actually develop really good projects that are actually going to get us to Soils 2026 completion, but, we're not stressing ourselves out about making sure we get enough acres, every single year. So what we're being asked now, and what we're going to be asked in the future, is to look at the projects. And so in order to make some, in order to get to the end, which is, again, complete initial mapping completion, right? So in order to get there, we need to make sure that we're spreading our work out throughout the course of the next few years, so that we're making progress annually, but we're also not backloading all of our projects at the end, so that, and at the end, you know, we're throwing all these acres, all these projects, and we're completing. We want to make sure that we're making progress every single year. So what we talked about was developing new national instructions for this Soils 2026 initial mapping initiative. Again, phase 2, not a new concept, but going into the next phase and utilizing all these wonderful tools and resources that we have to meet this goal. And so these national instructions will have minimum data standards for all of the data produced for Soils 2026. There will be requirements for initial mapping project planning and requirements for future project planning. And I want to emphasize that probably the most important thing that we're going to talk about, and the most important thing that I hope everyone gets out of this, is that we're not saying, and it should never be said, that when we do complete all of the initial mapping, then we need to go home. The point is to complete all the initial mapping so that we as scientists, and specifically soil scientists, can start doing some of the really awesome things that we as soil scientists know we have the potential to do. And so it's completing this, you know, lingering gap in our data so that in the future, after Soils 2026 is complete, we can start working on answering scientific questions. What do our partners need? What do our cooperators need? What interpretations are needed? Where are data gaps? This is an opportunity to fill in this hole, and then look towards the future and find, you know, projects that we are going to enjoy doing and that are needed. So it doesn't end when the initial mapping is done. We want to develop and provide training and workshopping to facilitate effective work planning. So again, emphasizing that this is a work planning effort. This is not a DSM effort. This is not a traditional soil inventory effort. This is a work planning and project planning effort to improve the way we plan our projects and ask those really hard questions of what do we actually need to get the work done. That is what this initiative is. We want to update the standards in the National Soil Survey Handbook to account for these reconnaissance products. And I'll talk about that a little bit more and it's sort of define that later on. We want project plans to successfully implemented and completed within this allotted time frame. Again, there's not a decision of whether or not we have a choice to finish our initial mapping by 2026. We have to do it. And so the question is, how are we going to do it? And are we going to spend all of our time trying to figure out a way not to get it done and complaining? Or are we going to spend our time knowing that there is this deadline and we need to find out-of-box ways of getting the work done? And that's going to make sure that everyone's going to have to be holding each other's hands at the table. All hands are on deck. And so, you know, we're going to need standards because as scientists, and, you know, we know we're soil scientists, so sometimes we need these standards to sort of align us and have some consistency across the board in how we do this. And then again, we want to make sure that these project plans are looked at annually and reevaluated so that if there's resources needed, that we can get the resources that you need behind each of these projects early on and not wait until the end to say, well, we needed it, but we weren't going to get it. So we want to make sure that all of those important questions are asked at the beginning of the project, that, you know, plan A, B, and C are well thought so that if there are resources that are needed, we can throw our weight behind those. And we want to improve the dynamic assessment. Again, soil surveys tend to be, you know, these initial soil surveys tend to be static, right? It's a stamp in time, but we need to have a more dynamic assessment of the progress on these projects, because in the future, we're taking soil survey from a more static methodology to a more dynamic assessment, right? So soil properties, this is what we're looking for beyond Soils 2026. And the most important part of this is the transparency of our efforts from the field to the national level and with our cooperators. There are cooperators that are willing to get involved and also put their weight behind this effort, but they don't know what we need. On a national level, you know, it's always, well, we need more money and we need more staff. Well, I will tell you, going into this initiative, we were told you will get no more money and you will get no extra staff. So all of the things that we decide and all of the things that this working committee has been talking about is ways to solve the problem, which is having data and you know, where we are in NOTCOM right now, needing to make sure that it's done by Soils 2026, and how to solve that without extra money and extra staff. And that, again, that means all hands on deck. That means that we're going to be pulling resources as best as we can, and putting a lot of weight, utilizing folks that have a particular set of expertise to get this done. And so this essential framework for completion is accelerating the initial mapping progress. Obviously, you know, with 12% completed, that leaves a lot remaining that needs to be done by the end of 2026. So we have no choice but to accelerate this initial mapping progress. We need some consistency, but we also need to communicate this initiative, I guess better. I don't know if better is the right way, but we need to be fully transparent and communicate with each other, because a lot of the work obviously is going to be, you know, heavily weighted by the MLRA staff. So we need to make sure that all of our means of communicating and our messages to our state soil scientists is consistent. And everyone, again, it's not a new initiative, but it's a new approach to getting this initiative done. So we need to make sure that we're getting the right communication out there. We want to make sure that we structure our projects logically to minimize duration, but also maximize available resources and illustrate incremental progress over the next 5 years. We do not want backloading where all of these projects are being completed in the last fiscal year. And as we know, as COVID should have taught us, that we always have to have plan A, B, and C because we don't know what's going to be thrown at us, right? So we still have to finish this. There are going to be things that come in our way, and how are we going to approach those challenges? Are we going to be challenge seekers and problem solvers, or are we just going to sit and backload the end and potentially not get what we're supposed to get done? And again, there is not an option. We have to get it done. Project completion and progress reporting are synonymous. So project completion, progress reporting are synonymous beginning in FY22. So, you know, don't worry about acres, and I don't say that lightly. I know that we have to have a way to report progress, but it's not about acres. It's about looking at a project, looking at a soil survey area and breaking that down into reportable projects over the course of the next few years. And so what we've talked about a lot is institutionalizing a NOTCOM classification system, and I will talk about that a bit more in the next few slides. But we want to define unique conditions. So for instance, do you have a wilderness area with limited access? Well, if you do, then we need to address those particular areas within a soil survey area a different way than we may be able to address an area within that NOTCOM that has great access and is highly managed. And so we need to start taking a look at our remaining areas, soil survey areas that are NOTCOM, and figuring out how we can break those down into separate areas that need very focused attention. We want to add necessary definition to spatial and tabular data sets. You know, obviously, raster soil survey is not going to be the product. The product is going to be Surgo, and that means that we're going to have to do some heavy lifting in the spatial and tabular side of the work that we do. Improve communication, transparency, and greater emphasis placed on the Soils 2026 initial mapping initiative, and greater emphasis on long-range planning, which means that we need to get more involved with our management teams, tech teams, and our cooperative soil survey partners. Enough reading. So this working committee is the overall working committee, and what we did is we decided to break that working committee. So that's your overall committee. We have three teams that have been also put together that are represented in the working committee in this overall soils initiative phase 2. And so there's a policy team, implementation team, and products team. And so within the policy team, the focus will be project planning, standards, and instruction, so national instructions. The implementation team, which I like to think of as the PR, the PR of everybody, is training and support and field resources. And then products. It's, they're defining the products that we're going to have. Obviously there's going to be some DSM techniques that we use, and then product resources. And so what resources do we need to get these products out there? Okay, this is a sort of a preliminary, but I would like to think that these are actually more finalized now. The policy team is working on this, but we have these classes of NOTCOM areas. So, class 1, limited extent and size with high management needs, good access. Class 2, these are the areas where we have partnering data that we can use in our work. Some of the TUI data. The real challenge with our partner data is that we need to get those into a format that we can use. Class 3 are NOTCOM areas of varying extent and have interpretive focus with significant access constraints. So, in some of these class 3 and 4, that's where we get into more of the heavy lifting of DSM techniques, where we need to identify these areas pretty quickly so that we can put resources behind them to address some of these DSM needs. I know that there's a huge learning curve to actually implementing DSM into our work. So that is what the classes look like, and within that, the DSM focus team has been working on defining the different raster levels. And if you can think about the raster levels being somewhat similar to our soil orders that we use. And so if we look at the sort of a current view of how we do our project planning, we have this soil survey area. And within that, we would have a project description, a general timeline of when we would get it done, some background information, tentative plans and projects, and then long-range progress projections. But this doesn't really tell us much about this soil survey area. So the idea is that we would want to, by taking those different NOTCOM classes, then we could break this soil survey area into different compartments or subset areas where we can address them with very specific needs and methods of how we're going to actually accomplish that goal. So if we look at what we're sort of proposing and what the policy team has been working on, we see that now we can take this same soil survey area, break those into the different classes. We know which soil survey area is going to be working on them. We have a more defined who, what, where, when, and how. We have progressive completion because we have all these projects with a specific set of milestones. And then we know that we're going to have in terms of our corporate database, our transactional Sergo, which is that check-in, check-out that we utilize to get our initial mapping done, or any changes and update mapping. We're able to pull those subset areas out, and we are able to do a more rapid assessment of where our progress is by breaking these into these subset areas. So if you look at the Soils Initiative Phase 2, this is the working committee, but then these are the members of each of the teams. And I'm not going to read all of them. I'll leave that up, and I will be happy to answer any questions. I see Dan Perkins has a comment. And so let me say, I am not insinuating in any way that we are not scientific. I'm not trying to insult the work, nor is the working committee trying to insult anyone on the West or anywhere else with SPSD that has done any work by saying you're not scientific or you haven't thought about, getting to the end of SOLS 2026. But we are only 12% complete, and this initiative is not new, and so we know that we have to use out-of-box methods. But again, it's not a DSM initiative, and we're not saying that anybody's projects that they have currently in place, we're not insinuating that you have to go back and redo all of those or redo your project plan. But we are asking that you take the standards that are being developed and the national instructions and look at the projects that you have and make sure that you've answered all of the questions of who, what, when, where, and how. And if your project falls in line with what will work and making sure that we get to the 2026, then no one is insinuating that you would get rid of that or that no one took this serious. And I think that the hardest part about being on this working committee is this assumption that we are insulting the work that folks are doing. But as I've been told, and as I tell my team, we have to think globally and not locally. So you as a soil scientist may be great and you may be doing a fantastic job and you have a plan in place, but the reality is that this is not necessarily consistent. And so for us to be able to make sure that we get to the end, we have to have a means of tracking the work. So we are definitely, and I am definitely not insinuating or that no one is scientific or hasn't thought about this or that their project plans are crap, but there's some reality in that that we have to face, and we have an objective, which is completing SOLS 2026. How are we going to do that? And so this team, this working committee and the 3 teams have been put together by headquarters to help push the project planning, the emphasis on greater project planning and greater transparency so that we can get there. And the team is there to put resources behind the work so that you, knowing that we're not going to have any extra money or any extra staff, will be able to get it done. Any other questions? I'll be happy to take.
I'm not seeing any others in the Q&A. So I think if folks do have questions, they can certainly contact you. I know that you're very informative on this subject. And I know I look forward to having the National Soil Survey Center involved with this effort. So thank you very much for your presentation. I did want to remind folks that the next webinar is going to be on August 10th. So I hope you're enjoying this session before we turn it over to the next presenter. I also want to remind folks to work with your local representatives. I'm sure they're reaching out, looking for more talks in this webinar series. So let's keep this going and keep it strong. Our next presenter is Chris Savastio from the Minden, Nevada office, who's going to be talking to us about the Nevada Playa Characterization Study. I'll turn it over to Chris now, and I won't even tell you about the time when I tried to drive across a playa. So it didn't turn out well. But Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Yeah, you do have to be careful out there for sure. And we usually try to take 2 trucks when we can, because there is always that risk that you are going to get stuck. Okay, here we go. So hopefully everyone can see my presentation. So thank you for the introduction once again. My name is Chris Savastio, and I'm the office leader for the Minden and Elko Soil Survey offices here in Nevada. Today, I'd like to talk to you about a project I'm very excited about called the Playa Characterization Study. First, let me introduce you to myself and my crew. That's me on the left. and pictured on the right are the rest of the soil scientists from the Minden Soil Survey Office. From left to right, we have Matt Cole, Megan Kruger, and Jessica Castablanco. And hopefully from these pictures, it's plain to see that we love working out in the playas. So this slide shows the location of our project area within Nevada and within what's known as the Great Basin. Maps of the Great Basin vary somewhat, but mostly look something like what's shown here. The Great Basin is defined in different ways, depending on how you're talking about it. But most often it's talked about, and the way that we think about it, it's talked about as the portion of the country that's hydrologically disconnected from the ocean. So all water within the Great Basin flows inward. The project area for the Playa characterization study is the boundary of MLRA 27, shown on this map in orange, and it's known as the Fallon-Lovelock area. MLRA 27 is characterized by low-lying mountain ranges and relatively broad valleys. The valleys are mostly alluvial in origin, though they contain significant lake deposits from the last ice age, when much of this area was covered in water. The playas are the remains of these evaporated ancient lake beds. So just for a little more background, this is a USGS published map showing the extent of Pleistocene lakes in the Western Great Basin. And you can't read the legend here because it's too small. But all the colors shown in this map, the blue, the yellow, and the orange, they all represent different ages of Pleistocene lakes, which were thought to have existed based on evidence of lake sediments. This is the prehistoric lake known as ancient Lake Lahontan, and it covered over 8,000 square miles of Nevada at one time. So let's talk about the purpose of the Playa characterization study, but first let's talk about the reasoning behind starting the project in MLRA 27. So first of all, MLRA 27 contains a significant number and diversity of playas to investigate. And furthermore, it's not that far from the Minden office, so we can more easily concentrate our efforts here without a lot of travel time. We can't really talk about the purpose of the project without explaining what a playa is in a little bit more detail. So I already discussed that they're formed from the sediments of ancient lakes that have since evaporated. Playas derive their appearance mostly from the fact that they're so saline that for the most part they can't support plant life. The surface is covered by a thin or thick salt crust. And another distinctive feature of playas is that they're almost completely flat. Playas are often considered exceedingly dry, but as Dave discovered, and as we'll discuss here in a moment, they're actually much wetter than they appear. Sorry, I'm going to go back one. The reason playas haven't received much attention over the years in soil survey is that they don't meet the technical definition of a soil. On page 1 of Keys to Soil Taxonomy, soil is defined as, in part, as being able to support vascular plant life. And no one can argue that by definition, playas are not technically soil based on that. However, these vast areas of unconsolidated lake sediments are managed as soil for various purposes. It seems like soil survey is the ideal place to characterize these areas, which until now have simply been labeled playas and given no attribute data in the published soil surveys. So our goal is to characterize all of the playas in MLRA 27 as proper soils with full attribute data and interpretations for soil survey over the course of 4 years. So we're currently in the second year of this project. So just a short list of a few ways in which playas are managed where soil survey information could prove useful. Playas contain all manner of roads, from planned and developed roads to makeshift off-road vehicle paths. Outbuildings are constructed in the middle of some of these larger playas, as well as vast flood control projects in some cases. Most famously, playas are a big attraction around here for recreation, particularly the Burning Man Festival, which is pictured here in the slide and takes place annually on one of MLRA 27's largest playas, which is the Black Rock Desert. So most people who've only driven through the Great Basin have only experienced playas from this oblique angle illustrated in the photo here. And playas provide a bright contrast to the drab landscape around them, but playas themselves are fairly monolithic. The they seem that way. From this perspective, it would be easy to imagine the playas are extremely uniform and desolate, and maybe not worth taking a closer look at for soil survey. But on closer inspection, we experience a fair amount of soil diversity. Maybe not in this picture. 2020 was the first year of our 4-year project. Our objective was for the 3 soil scientists who were here at the time to map 100,000 acres of playa as soil map units, which included setting up new map units and developing new soil components. We focused our efforts on one soil survey area, which is a subset of Churchill County near the town of Fallon. And our crew collected a total of 32 full PEDON descriptions in the month of May to start our effort. And so through these initial efforts, collaborating over email and teams to discuss map unit concepts during those early months of the pandemic, our team exceeded its mapping goal and characterized approximately 175,000 acres of playa as 3 new soil map units, which we'll discuss in brief right now. So the first map unit that I'll discuss is typical Udor fence, 0 to 1% slopes. And as described within this map unit, this is the dominant soil component found in playas at large thus far. These soils best describe the vast expanse of drier playas, which is not to say that they're dry, but even in the summer, these soils are moist just below the surface, and redoxamorphic concentrations can often be found quite close to the surface as well, which is indicating the possibility that a water table existed near the surface at some point. These soils are entirely composed of silty and clayey lacustrine sediments with a thin aeolian surface. Wetter versions of playa soils exist in areas where groundwater recharge occurs, and we're mapping these as sodic endoaquants, and which are the dominant soil on this wetter map unit. So these are characterized as having a much thinner salt crust on the surface and more remarkable redoxamorphic features in the soil, including depletions throughout the soil profile, indicating a more poorly drained soil. These map units are subject to flooding, and the minor components include man-made floodways and levees as part of the, because we see those as part of the large flood control projects out here, which is also seen in that photo on the right. The third map unit that we developed is also dominated by this wetter sodic endoaquant component, but importantly includes a very interesting geomorphic feature called Parna dunes. And a Parna dune is just like a sand dune formed by the same aeolian processes, but composed entirely of silt and clay. Somewhat mysteriously, these dunes support vascular plant life. One of our soil scientists confidently identified the shrub shown in the slide as pickleweed, and it's the only plant that is apparently able to grow here, but they grow well on the dunes. These map units occur on the margins of some of the larger playas in MLRA 27. So now that we've spent a year working in the playas, we have a pretty good idea of what is still relatively unknown to us and what's worth investigating over the remainder of the study. Soil water dynamics are a big question mark. We aren't really sure why the soil profile is as wet as it is during the summer months, nor are we really sure how wet these soils are throughout the year. Soil temperature is another question. These playas are at the lowest position on the landscape and completely exposed to solar radiation. So our best guess is that these soils are thermic, so warmer than the mesic vegetated upland soils that surround them. We also know that these soils are saline and likely sodic, but we don't have any lab data to express what we're dealing with in terms of soil chemistry. So our primary goal this year on this project has been to start answering some of these questions. So last month, our crew went out to one of the larger playas that we have to install soil climate stations and perform lab characterization sampling on 2 of our dominant components, the Udic cryor fence, the drier playa soil, and the sodic endoaquants. So here's a couple photos from that sampling effort last month. As you can see, the soils are perfectly dry on the surface, which allows us to easily drive a backhoe out there. I say easily, but also cautiously. And because just below that soil surface, the soil is impossibly slick. It's wet, silt, and clay. So we went out there and we collected our bulk and clod samples on each horizon. And then alongside each one of these soil characterization sampling sites, we went out before we sampled and we installed these soil climate stations. So we're using this project as an opportunity to deploy some of these new soil climate stations, new to us, that are considered very reliable. Matt Cole, who's pictured in the center of this photo on the left, is the project leader on Minden's soil climate study. He acquired some Campbell stations from Utah Snow Survey folks, and we purchased some newer Campbell equipment as well to start testing it out in our area. Excuse me. These stations are great in that they're solar powered and the probes measure both temperature and moisture. So we installed Campbell probes at 20 and 50 centimeters at each location. So the wetter soil component provided an opportunity to hopefully be able to study water table depth. Our office purchased all the equipment necessary to install a water table monitoring well, as well as a water level sensor and station that can be powered by the Campbell battery and co-located in the box with the Campbell's equipment. We installed the well and are waiting the sensor. We're waiting for the sensor, which has been ordered and is pictured here on the right. In this picture, I'm attaching window screen to the portion of the PVC pipe that went into the 2-meter auger hole. And the purpose of the screen is to prevent sediment from moving into the well. The underground section of the pipe also has holes drilled in it to allow water to move freely. 1 meter of PVC pipe remains above the surface where the sensor will be deployed. So the next steps in this project, our process for the remainder of the Playa project is as follows. The goal is to finish mapping the playas of MLRA 27, including the development of new soil map units and many more soil descriptions. We intend to continue monitoring Playa soil climate well beyond the life of the Playa project as we group that effort into the Minden soil climate study at large. As we proceed, we anticipate further need of sampling and perhaps more soil climate stations as we see fit. And when we eventually get an ecological site specialist in Minden, we'll send that person out to develop ecological sites for our Playa components. There's currently no site in MLRA 27 that covers what we're seeing out there. So ultimately, our goal is to expand Playa characterization to the other Great Basin MLRAs within Minden and Elko's purview. I expect these efforts will add a lot of value to soil survey, and expanding this project to other MLRAs will hopefully be supported. So thanks for the opportunity to discuss this project with you, and please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Chris.